This conference will now be recorded.
And speaking to people my age now, that in the 60s I did a lot of drugs. And you could look at the value of those drugs. But at a certain point, I realized that it took so much time away from other things. And I think technology is that kind of drug. And the students know that they're addicted and they don't want to be addicted. And they have that, how do you kick an addiction that you love? And that's
with that thought, I'm going to ruthlessly cut us off. So the camera's not going to work, but we're going to record this session for posterity, at least audio. And if other people come back on, they can hear. The one or two people we had sort of dropped off in impatience and disgust. So my name is Robert Platt. We're here to do a campus climate update. With me on the panel is Joanne Florino of the Philanthropy Roundtable, Richard Bensel of the Government Department, and Randy Wade of the School of Integrated Plant Sciences. And we're here to discuss a subject that is, I know, very troubling and interesting to all of us, particularly the focus of what happened during the past school year. And I want to start it off with Joanne. And the first question I have for her is, what are the recent developments in teaching the discussing across differences among students?
Well, thank you, Bob. I have to say, I do have Cornell creds too. I was a graduate student here in the 1970s. I got my master's degree in 75. I would have liked to have finished my dissertation, but I really mean this, I inadvertently ended up working at Atlantic Philanthropies for Chuck Feeney, which was a life-changing experience for me. And so I've been working in the philanthropic sector ever since. I learned two things right now, and that is one of the courses I taught as an instructor when I was a graduate student was American Conservative Thought. And I also voted for George McGovern in 1972. So there you go. So what's happening in this field, this is really what I'm taking from all the donors I've been working with over a number of years, but especially since 2020. This is the kind of that was definitely a pivotal year, both because of COVID and because of some of the social reactions that took place in that year. It's an area that's has attracted and is continuing to attract a lot of money from philanthropic donors who are, in many cases, angry with their alma maters and are wanting to have a multitude of views expressed on all the campuses. So we've been talking a lot about the lack of viewpoint diversity among faculty members, for example. And you've seen the statistics that at Cornell, 95% of the faculty contributes to Democratic candidates, that kind of thing. But public universities really did take the lead in moving forward more quickly, I think, in producing more viewpoint diversity among faculty members, especially the University of Florida and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I'm very familiar with that second one. I think one of the things that has been discouraging to some of the other universities is that what was founded at those schools were really closed off centers that were overwhelmingly conservative. So it was very much a clear reaction to the overwhelming liberalism that was on campus. And so this was their first stab at dealing with it. More recently, I think people are getting into more of that mode that we're seeing, in fact, right on campus here with the course disagreement and the way that Richard is teaching, which is a multitude of viewpoints. Let's have a multitude of viewpoints. Let's have open debate. I will say that Dartmouth just received a $25 million gift from a family of alumni to produce that kind of outcome. I'm going to look at what I actually said. It is to endow the Dartmouth dialogues and to make challenging, respectful conversations a core pillar of the undergraduate experience. So, and I will say we have the beginnings of something like that on this campus, where Dean Lowen of Arts and Sciences, there's actually a flyer right out in the hallway. It's a course called Disagreement, which actually launched this spring. It's for freshmen. It involves bringing in scholars and other experts with a multitude of opinions, but who disagree on some really core issues in American life. And I think that that's really the way to go. I mean, I understand why there was that initial conservative backlash, but at this point in time, and I will also say, Richard, that I work for a conservative organization, and we are really well aware of how many different kinds of conservatism there are. I mean, we're talking about populists, we're talking about traditional conservatives, we're talking about libertarians, which are out there in the universe somewhere. And so it's not easy anymore to say, I'm a conservative. And so some of those groups are going to be more supportive of President Trump than the others. And that's where we are on campus, I think, right now. And so the goal, I think, is to really begin to have honest conversations between provosts and presidents and their donors about what would really make a difference on the campus, and see if you can steer some of those capital projects, which I know are really popular with the administrations of all schools, not just this one, but into some more meaty conversations on difficult topics. Because I sense young people are really hungry for that, and hungry for a place where they can freely express their opinions and know that that's part of what's important.
Well, isn't it, I mean, traditionally, well, I shouldn't say traditionally because I'm from a very old class, but I think that students looked upon going to university as a way of breaking away from whatever they were raised in, whether they were raised liberal and wanted to be conservative, or raised conservative and wanted to be liberal. So the idea that they should feel safe. They should feel that it's safe to express their opinions and to debate their opinions on campus. So I'm assuming that the thing that these owners are funding is to create that kind of atmosphere.
It is, very much so. And I haven't been a student at Cornell for a very long time. So I don't know, and I'd have to rely on both of you to answer this question, to what degree faculty have been guilty of actually expressing their own political and ideological thoughts in a way that comes across to students that this is the truth. What I'm telling you is the truth, and everything else you can discard. I think that's been exaggerated somewhat, but you're going to always get a tinge of what that instructor himself thinks, unless you're very, very careful as an instructor.
Well, one way that this is sort of manifesting itself is a lot of state legislatures and donors have focused on civics education in higher education. Do you have any news on that front?
You know, it's awfully late to be teaching civics when you've got a group of 17 and 18-year-olds in front of you. And where I would go back to is the disintegration of civics training in K-12, education. I mean, I know that New York had a very stiff, assignments for different grades, because I was in New Jersey, but then in New York, and there were things that you got to learn. And I think that for a period of time, and it may have been, I'm thinking in the teens, a lot of schools started using civics as a way to produce more activism among students. And while I think that's important, and that engagement in civil society is not only important but critical, it scares me when I realize that there are college students who really cannot explain how the American government system works. And how, I'm going back to how a bill becomes a law, because that's what my kids are watching. But that's really serious, and why, and also going back to original sources, there is no substitution for reading the Constitution yourself, for reading the Declaration of Independence yourself. We should be thinking about that, especially in this year. And understanding why the executive was given so much power in 1787, and why it was so important to have a judicial branch in 1787. What was going on that inspired the founding fathers to do that? Or reading the Federalist Papers and understanding that there was always disagreement. There was disagreement in degree, and that compromise is not a sin. Because I think we've grown up with who's the winner, right? And on a lot of these issues, there shouldn't be a winner, there should be compromise. So those are sort of basic civics, part of civics education that I think we've lost over a period of time. And it's, we can all beat on the founders for one reason or another, but the reality is 250 years is pretty,
That's because
yeah,
they
pretty
teach
special
what
for
is
us.
tested. And if it's not being tested, it's not being taught. So,
Right.
in New York, anyway, that's the only
With
school
the
system I'm
regions, yes.
familiar with.
But in Virginia, they also have a standards of learning that is somewhat similar. I'd like to give Professor Bensel a chance to talk. Could you tell us about your, and again, this is important because there's a feedback cycle between the sort of sense of freedom of self-expression among students and the conduct system. So could you please tell us about your work both in the Faculty Senate and the University Assembly on the conduct system?
So, for some years, I've been active in revising the student code of conduct and say it hasn't gone well. And we've tried, this was in the University Assembly. I've also been active in the Faculty Senate for about 10 years. And one of the problems we have is that while there is this freedom of expression, code of conduct really becomes important in protests. And it really becomes important in a way of, when you protest, you are violating some norm or regulation or rule. That's the definition of a protest. The question comes up whether the cost of that violation in a protest is so prohibitive that all protest ends. And so in our work in the Faculty Senate has been to take a very present central administration in Cornell takes a very draconian view of protest. And if you protest at all, they'll throw the book at you. And I mean, really throw the book at you. We had a year ago, last March, we had a graduate student in ILR who went to an event and stood up and in Hebrew protested against an Israeli government official. Just lasted 7 seconds. And she got up and she left, and she wasn't dragged out or anything else. And the administration caught up with her, the police did, in the hallway, put her under arrest, took her name, filed a case with the disciplinary office. And then immediately suspended some of her activities on campus, not all of them, but she could still go to classes and so forth, but a lot of them, where she could do. And then for about 10 months, they didn't follow up on the charges. They didn't do any investigation. She was punished. Then in December, they did follow up on the charges and they arranged a hearing, which then was February, I've forgotten, this year. And in the hearing, even though they had done some work to stack the jury, stack the jury with pro-administration officials, she was acquitted.
By a hearing panel of
By a
students,
hearing
faculty, and staff.
panel of students and faculty. And you look at this, 7 seconds. It's a very passionate protest and had religious overtones. Certainly was a morality one. 7 seconds. That was it. Administration threw the book at her. And we have tried in the faculty senate, and we passed resolutions on this, tried to rebalance punishment and protest and enforcement. And we have not really succeeded. And you can see part of this in the recent events involving the president, where the same kind, one of the students in the protest, not but another student was, it charged him, he was a graduate student, really suspended him from classes and everything else. He lost his grant, had to quit graduate school. But in doing that, the major thing he had done at a protest was he forced his way in to an event like this and bumped a police officer. And for that, he was suspended for a year, finding forced out of graduate school. President Konlikoff ran over a student. Immediately, instead of a hearing or anything else, the Board of Trustees instituted chairman and vice chairman, an ad hoc committee that then vindicated him. And this discrepancy in an intellectual community is really, really, really strong. And yeah, one of the things we've tried to do in the Campus Codes Committee and the Faculty Senate is to bring the central administration into account that if they're going to do these things to students, that they should be susceptible to the same kind of manipulation. It should not be something where we have a double standard, which are really do.
Randy, I want to bring you on next. You're head of the Cornell chapter of the Heterodox Academy. Do you want to spend a moment telling us about that and telling us about whether you believe that Cornell is true to its goal of seeking truth?
Let me say I have a co-chair, Phoebe here, who's also a co-chair of the Heterodox Academy campus community, and we're truly heterodox. within ourselves. I want to just go back to this lady's statement. I think actually most people come to Cornell now to get credentialed.
To get what?
Credentials.
Credential.
Not to seek a bigger, first of all, I want to start by saying I think there's nothing more important than family. But still, it's important to break away from family and find out that bigger world, to find out who you are. And so they don't come to do that. However, they have a huge emptiness in themselves that they don't know what it is. And as soon as you give them the chance to see that there's things that they can question and develop themselves, they just go for it. Except those chances are rare. So there's an emptiness that we perpetuate. I also want to say to Joanne, I actually give my opinion in class. And however, everything's prefaced by what I first say to them. Do not believe anything I say. I'm going to give you enough personal experience doing experiments, making observations, and reading original texts to come up with a new points of view. And so I model a belief in my thinking, but I could care less whether they go with that or not. And I actually said that because we had a dean that thought that non-majors classes shouldn't have labs. And I truly believe that in order to get things here, you really need this kind of experience and muscle reality, muscle memory, to do things. So I created this non-majors course that had a lab, but not a designated lab, but they all had it. So that's why I came up with it. Don't believe anything I say, I'm going to give you first-hand experience. And but it turned out that was the most important thing I could possibly say, because these students have grown up turning bullet points on PowerPoints into test points. And there's that emptiness about what learning even is, what it's about. And they're dying for that opportunity. And I'm not sure the faculty, in fact, I do not believe the faculty at Cornell can create that opportunity on campus. And various organizations, like a civics organization, programs, I think is the way to go to do that. So I talked about trust before, lack of trust. And the philosophy of postmodernism, with all due respect to Phoebe, because she is a postmodernist, but it's a philosophy that says there's no objective truth, and all knowledge is socially constructed to serve the oppressors over the oppressed, and that second part has truly gone crazy, to where you have somebody like Herbert Marcuse saying we should have repressive tolerance. That is, in the name of tolerance, certain ideas simply cannot be said, certain policies cannot be proposed, and certain behaviors cannot be permitted. And that's exactly where we are. That's why people are afraid to speak and not even question their thoughts. So the Heterodox Academy is trying to bring in speakers
From outside the campus.
Outside the campus. And inside, Barry Strauss. We left it because our campus doesn't tolerate conservative thought. And we have actually dyed in the wool. I still think I'm a flaming liberal, but on campus, because I open my mouth, I'm a racist, transphobe, Islamophobe, fascist, and Freudian. Proudly. And so we bring in, for example, we have this postmodernism has resulted in a crisis of meaning, a crisis of faith, in a crisis of knowledge. So how do we even build knowledge? What is knowledge? It is something that's not a part of our ethos. And brought in Jonathan Rauch, who wrote the book, The Constitution of Knowledge, A Defense of Truth. We brought in Jonathan Turley, who talks about, on campus, if you go to talk state, the Constitution is something that just gets in the way of activism. And after listening to Aziz Rana speak about big C and little c constitutions, never heard of such a thing. The big C constitutions, I went to Richard afterwards and said, I guess I'm a big C constitutionalist, is somebody that believes the Constitution is a founding document of the United States, where little c constitutionalist believes the Constitution just gets in the way. And that actually clarified various sides to me when he said that. We've brought in Cornell in general, in terms of teaching and research, is a materialist organization. There's no such thing as the immaterial. Carl Sagan's way of saying anything immaterial is like the tooth theory. Well, let's face it, mathematics is immaterial. The boundary conditions needed to solve differential equations are immaterial. May I say, God is immaterial. They don't all necessarily relate to the tooth theory. So we bring in people that talk, scientists who question the materialist nature of science and offer alternative explanations. For example, James Torr, Michael Behe, Michael Egner, Brian Miller, and Stephen Meyer will come in. Fall.
One person that I was very impressed with was you brought in John Tomasi, and he was co-sponsored by the Committee on the Future of University. And one of the most interesting questions that was presented to him, so I'm going to present it to you, is if the faculty has responsibility for hiring new faculty, how do you break through the cycle of just people hiring more of their own kind rather than other kinds?
To use the heterodox academic principles of intellectual charity and intellectual humility. Two things that do not exist at the moment.
Yeah, and hopefully money to hire them.
It costs the same amount of money to hire somebody that just fits in the mold.
Right, right.
Well, on that, I would just say that Harvard has actually been out there seeking $10 million endowments from donors to diversify the faculty. They're not saying the words to diversify the faculty out loud, but that's the game plan. And I think that is something that is of concern to Day Hall. I don't know how successful they'll be. But I just can say, when I was a graduate student in the history department, we went from one end of the spectrum to the other. God bless Pierce Williams, who was always there, to talk, because Pierce was talking about the greatness that is Western civilization. And, that was the altar he would die on. And then we had younger faculty members who were much, much more, nobody was using the term progressive then, but liberal. And a whole bunch of people that were in the middle. And I think it really was amazing. I mean, you had Michael Kamen, you had Mary Beth Norton, you had big people that were getting, winning Pulitzer Prizes. And, but it went from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I think that's been missing in a lot of, humanities and social sciences. Economics always stands alone just because it's economics, but history, government, sociology, it gets hard.
Now.
And science now, yeah, and so, certainly in some areas.
I'm a woman.
And, don't.
Okay.
But the other thing I do want to say for the benefit of people who are back here for reunion, there is a resurgence of interest in faith. on many college campuses, and this is one of them. So Chesterton House is growing. Colas, which is the Catholic Institute of Thought on campus, not of Cornell, but at Cornell. I had lunch with their executive director yesterday, and it's, again, I mean, the kids are really interested. They're asking for a more sacred space for worship, which I'm not sure you're going to see a Catholic church built on the campus, but, and then Hillel. Hillel is a huge support for Hillel.
And their major donor was just appointed to serve 5 years as an at-large trustee.
But that impetus is not just here, but you're right that there's an emptiness now and people are looking to fill it. And it's interesting because I know I did my undergraduate work at Georgetown, so there was faith. But this is, you know, when I came to Cornell, it was different for me because I've been through Catholic schools my whole life. But it's very encouraging to see this. I don't really care which faith it is. But there's this outburst of looking for what? Well, are they looking for something that is clear, that is definite, that is truth? You know, so relativity takes you so far.
Okay, well, go ahead.
One remark. I'll backtrack a little bit. You said that economics stands by itself. I disagree with that. Economics can't stand by itself. It's so important to every other function in life that it has to be considered as part of anything that we do.
But there's going to be more viewpoint diversity in that department.
Then there had been.
Yeah, than the other departments that stand next to it, which I think are like government history, econ government history. You know, government history, less diversity.
Well, I thought we should probably give me a chance to just do a 3-minute spiel on what's happening this past year on campus in terms of law stuff. The first one is that we had a very important referendum in December where over 3,000 undergraduate students voted. It probably would have been more had it not been pushed off until the middle exams. And they voted 93% in favor of separating the campus judicial system from the central administration. And they voted 91% on turning to the idea of a campus-wide code of conduct rather than a separate student code. We had campus-wide up until December of 2020. The other thing I thought we should really mention is that after years of political pressure, they did appoint, unfortunately, an administration-based student code and procedure review committee. I was hoping to be able to tell you what the recommendations are, but they promised to have them out before the end of the school year, and they still have not been released. So more to come on that. They took what you all know is the Title IX office, and they recast it as the Office of Civil Rights. They could bring in Title VI, which deals with Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, but they kept the old effective procedures. So those we hope will get relooked at. And finally, there's a need to take a holistic look at all the other codes and procedures. So now we have a separate student athlete responsibilities function that is now being administered entirely within the Department of Athletics. So if you're on a team, you're told you're expected to have exemplary behavior, and then they can take disciplinary action against you, including suspending the whole team, which they did this year for the lightweight rowing team. And there's also Greek life, where we've been having a very messy battle for some time over how conduct should be regulated and who regulates it and how much due process and so on. So those are the things to watch on that. Are there any other concluding remarks from any of the other panelists? Anything else from the audience? Okay, if not,
Is the video available for the panel?
Yes, that's all posted on the Cornellians.org website. The video and audio work fine there, not here. I do want to take a moment to thank our co-sponsors for today's event, the Cornell chapter of Heterodox Academy, Cornellians United for Free Speech, the Cornell Political Union, the Cornell College Republicans, and the Cornell Review. And the audio of at least half of this presentation will be posted. I'm so sorry for all the AV problems, but we'll make it up to you next time. And I want to thank our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You don't keep